John had always been a dreamer. Ever since he was a kid, he imagined having his own little piece of paradise, a quiet place where he could escape the noise and chaos of everyday life. For years, he worked hard, saved every penny he could, and finally, at the age of 35, he achieved that dream. He bought a stunning property with its own private lake. The lake wasn't huge, but it was perfect for fishing, kayaking, or just sitting by the water with a cup of coffee. It was surrounded by tall trees and untouched nature, making it feel like something out of a postcard. The cabin on the property was small but cozy, with wooden walls and a fireplace that crackled warmly during chilly evenings. John loved everything about it. The sound of birds chirping in the morning, the way the sunlight danced on the water's surface, and the peaceful silence that enveloped the area. He spent most weekends there, far away from the stress of city life. It was his sanctuary, his happy place. But there was one thing John didn't fully anticipate when he bought the property: the neighbors. His land bordered an upscale housing development governed by a strict homeowners association, HOA. The HOA community was made up of well-off families who enjoyed living in their fancy homes with manicured lawns and swimming pools. While their properties ended at the edge of the forest near John's land, many residents seemed to think they had free rein over his lake too. At first, John didn't mind. He noticed a few people walking down to the lake occasionally, maybe to fish or take pictures. He figured it was harmless. But over time, more and more people started showing up. Some came with coolers full of drinks, others brought inflatable rafts, and some even hosted gatherings right on his shore. John tried to ignore it, thinking it wouldn't happen often. However, the visits became frequent and messy. Trash began piling up along the edges of the lake. Plastic bottles, snack wrappers, and cigarette butts littered the once pristine ground. Once, John found a broken chair someone had left behind after what looked like a wild party. Even worse, someone had damaged his wooden dock, leaving splinters and cracks all over it. When he confronted a couple of visitors politely, asking them not to leave trash or break things, they acted surprised. "We've been coming here for years," one man said. "No one ever told us it was private." That's when it hit John. These people genuinely believed the lake belonged to everyone. They thought it was part of their neighborhood amenities, like a shared park or pool. But the truth was, John legally owned the entire lake and the land around it. Every inch of it was his, according to the deed he held. He had paid for it, maintained it, and cherished it. Yet, somehow, these strangers felt entitled to use it however they pleased without permission. John knew he couldn't keep ignoring the problem. If he didn't do something soon, his beautiful retreat would turn into a dumping ground. He decided it was time to draw a line. He wanted his peace back, and he was determined to protect what was rightfully his. Little did he know, this decision would spark a fiery conflict with someone who wasn't used to being told no, a woman whose name would soon become infamous in the neighborhood, Karen. John knew he had to take action before the situation spiraled further out of control. He couldn't keep letting people treat his private property like a public playground. After doing some research and consulting with a lawyer, he decided to install a sturdy metal gate at the entrance to his land. The gate was tall, secure, and painted a neutral color so it wouldn't stick out too much. Alongside it, he placed large, clear signs that read "Private Property, No Trespassing." Just to be extra cautious, he added smaller plaques explaining that the lake and surrounding area were privately owned. Once the gate was up, John sent formal letters to the HOA board informing them of his decision. In the letter, he politely explained that while he appreciated their community's interest in the lake, it was his legal property, and he needed to enforce boundaries to preserve its condition. He even suggested alternatives, like local parks or other nearby lakes where residents could enjoy outdoor activities. To his relief, most neighbors seemed to understand. Some expressed disappointment but respected his right to make decisions about his own land. However, not everyone reacted so reasonably. Enter Karen, a woman known throughout the neighborhood for her fiery personality and unrelenting determination to get what she wanted. Karen wasn't just any resident. She was the self-appointed leader of the HOA, someone who thrived on drama and loved being the center of attention. She saw John's gate as a direct challenge to her authority, and an insult to the community she prided herself on protecting. Karen wasted no time stirring the pot. Within days, she began spreading rumors about John among the residents. She claimed he was greedy and selfish, hoarding the lake for himself when it belonged to everyone. She accused him of ruining the neighborhood's quality of life and insisted he was trying to isolate himself from the community. Her words carried weight with some of the more impressionable neighbors, and soon, whispers about John started circulating at coffee mornings and HOA meetings. But Karen didn't stop there. She took things a step further by organizing informal gatherings to discuss how they could deal with John. At one such meeting, she stood in front of a group of concerned homeowners, dramatically waving her arms as she spoke. "This is unacceptable," she declared. "That lake has been part of our lives for years. We can't let one person take it away from us. It's not fair." Her fiery speeches struck a chord with some residents, especially those who had grown accustomed to using the lake without question. A few vocal supporters joined her cause, vowing to fight back against John's unreasonable restrictions. Others, however, remained skeptical, quietly wondering if maybe Karen was blowing things out of proportion. Still, no one dared to stand up to her. Karen had a reputation for turning on anyone who crossed her. Meanwhile, John tried to stay calm and focused. He knew Karen's accusations weren't based on facts, and he felt confident in his legal standing. But her relentless campaign was starting to wear on him. Every day, he noticed new cars slowing down near his gate, curious neighbors peeking through the trees, or even outright glaring at him when he drove past. It was clear that Karen wasn't going to back down easily, and neither was he. The tension between John and Karen simmered beneath the surface, growing stronger with each passing day. What started as a simple attempt to protect his property was quickly turning into something far bigger than John had ever imagined. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The calm before the storm didn't last long. One sunny Saturday morning, just as John was settling into his favorite chair on the porch with a cup of coffee, he heard voices coming from the direction of his gate. At first, he thought it might be a couple of curious neighbors stopping by to ask questions. But as he walked closer, he realized it was something much bigger and far more confrontational. Standing at the entrance to his property was Karen, flanked by a small group of residents. Some looked nervous, shifting their weight from foot to foot, while others wore expressions of defiance. Karen stood front and center, arms crossed, her face flushed with determination. She had clearly come prepared for a showdown. "John," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut through the peaceful morning air. "We need to talk about this ridiculous gate you've put up. You can't just lock us out of our own lake." John sighed inwardly, but kept his composure. He stepped forward, making sure to stay on his side of the gate. "Good morning, Karen," he said calmly. "I'm happy to explain things again if you'd like, but I think I made it pretty clear in my letter that this is private property." Karen rolled her eyes dramatically, as though his explanation was absurd. "Private property? Please. That lake has been part of this community for years. Everyone uses it. Families, kids, everyone. You're ruining their fun because you're too selfish to share." John felt a flicker of frustration, but pushed it aside. He knew arguing with Karen wouldn't solve anything. Instead, he pulled out a folder containing copies of his deed and other legal documents proving his ownership. Holding them up, he said firmly, "This isn't about sharing or being selfish. This is about the law. I legally own this lake and the land around it. If anyone here wants proof, I'm happy to show them." For a moment, there was silence. The other residents exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to respond. But Karen wasn't ready to back down. She stepped closer to the gate, pointing a finger at John. "You think waving papers around changes anything? People have been using this lake for decades. You're trying to rewrite history." Her words sparked murmurs of agreement among the group, though some still looked uncertain. One man spoke up hesitantly. "Look, maybe we could work something out, like scheduled days for everyone to use the lake." John shook his head. "I appreciate the suggestion, but this is my home, my sanctuary. I bought it to get away from crowds and noise. Allowing constant access would defeat the purpose." Karen's face turned red with anger. "This isn't over," she snapped. Without another word, she whipped out her phone and dialed 911. When the operator answered, she launched into an exaggerated rant. "Hi, yes, I need to report someone who's illegally restricting public access to a lake. Yes, it's urgent. This man is violating our rights." John couldn't believe what he was hearing. He raised his hands in exasperation. "Really, Karen? Calling the police over this?" Before long, a patrol car arrived. Two officers stepped out, looking confused as they approached the scene. Karen immediately jumped in, speaking loudly and gesturing wildly. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. This man is refusing to let us use the lake, even though it's always been open to the public. He's breaking the law." The officers listened patiently, then turned to John. He handed them the documents he'd brought with him, explaining the situation clearly and calmly. After reviewing the paperwork, one of the officers nodded. "Sir, based on these records, it looks like this is indeed your private property. You have every right to restrict access." Karen's jaw dropped. "What? That can't be right. What about public access laws?" The second officer shook his head. "Those laws apply to bodies of water owned by the government or designated as public resources. Since this lake is privately owned, those rules don't apply here." Humiliated and furious, Karen stormed off, muttering under her breath. The rest of the group slowly dispersed, some casting apologetic glances at John. As the officers left, they advised John to document any future incidents involving trespassing or harassment. Though the immediate crisis had passed, John knew this wasn't the end. Karen's pride had taken a hit, and he doubted she'd let things go quietly. Still, standing there alone by his gate, he felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. For now, at least he had stood his ground, and the law was on his side. If John thought Karen would back down after her embarrassing encounter with the police, he was sorely mistaken. Instead of retreating, she doubled down, determined to make his life as difficult as possible. Her pride had been wounded, and now she saw this battle not just as a fight over a lake, but as a personal crusade to expose John for what she believed were his selfish intentions. Over the next few weeks, Karen launched a full-blown smear campaign against him. She began spreading wild rumors throughout the neighborhood, painting John as some kind of villain. At first, it was subtle, whispered comments at HOA meetings or passive-aggressive posts in the community's online forum. But soon, her accusations grew louder and more outrageous. She claimed John was polluting the lake, despite the fact that he meticulously cleaned up trash left by trespassers, cutting down trees illegally, and even evading taxes on his property. None of it was true, but her dramatic flair made it hard for some residents not to wonder if there might be a grain of truth in her words. Karen also took her complaints directly to the HOA board, demanding they take legal action against John. She argued that the association should sue him to gain access to the lake, insisting that it was vital for the neighborhood's quality of life. However, when pressed for evidence to support her claims, Karen struggled to provide anything concrete. The board members, many of whom were already skeptical of her theatrics, began to push back. One member pointed out that suing John could cost the HOA thousands of dollars, a risky move without solid grounds. Another reminded everyone that private property laws were clear. John had every right to do what he wanted with his land. Despite the lack of support from the board, Karen refused to give up. She started organizing petitions, going door to door to collect signatures from neighbors who agreed that John shouldn't hoard the lake. Some signed out of genuine frustration, while others simply wanted to avoid conflict with Karen. But much to her dismay, the petition gained little traction. Many residents privately admitted that while they missed using the lake, they didn't feel comfortable challenging someone over something so legally straightforward. Meanwhile, John noticed strange things happening around his property. His mailbox, once sturdy and intact, was found bent and dented one morning. A week later, he discovered that someone had slashed the tires on his truck, leaving deep gashes in the rubber. Trash bags filled with garbage mysteriously appeared near his gate, forcing him to spend hours cleaning up the mess. It didn't take a detective to figure out who was behind these acts of vandalism. Karen's bitterness was practically written all over them. But John wasn't about to let these petty attacks break him. If anything, they only strengthened his resolve. He installed security cameras around his property, positioning them strategically to capture any suspicious activity. He also filed formal reports with the local police whenever incidents occurred, documenting everything carefully. Each time, officers visited the scene, reviewed the footage, and warned Karen to stop her behavior. Though she denied involvement, the mounting evidence made it increasingly difficult for her to escape responsibility. As the weeks dragged on, John found himself caught between annoyance and amusement. On one hand, dealing with Karen's antics was exhausting. On the other hand, watching her self-destructive spiral was almost entertaining. Her desperation was palpable, and it seemed like everyone in the neighborhood could see it, even those who initially sided with her. Slowly but surely, her credibility began to crumble. Still, John knew better than to underestimate Karen. She was relentless, unpredictable, and clearly unwilling to admit defeat. Every new incident reminded him that this feud wasn't just about a lake. It was about ego, pride, and control. And until Karen finally accepted that she couldn't win, John braced himself for whatever came next. The tension between John and Karen reached its peak on a bright Saturday morning, one that promised sunshine and relaxation. But instead of peace, the day turned into a spectacle no one in the neighborhood could ignore. Karen had spent weeks planning what she called a community cleanup day, though everyone knew it was really just another attempt to challenge John's authority over the lake. Armed with trash bags, gloves, and determination, dozens of residents showed up at the entrance to John's property. Karen stood at the front of the group, holding a clipboard like some kind of protest leader. She wore sunglasses perched on top of her head and carried a megaphone, ready to rally her troops. The gate, firmly locked as always, loomed ahead of them, with its bold private property, no trespassing signs glaring down. When John arrived, alerted by the commotion, he wasn't entirely surprised to see the crowd gathered there. What did surprise him, however, was the sheer audacity of Karen's plan. Instead of backing off when she saw him approach, she stepped forward, megaphone in hand, and addressed the group as if she were leading a grand cause. "Friends and neighbors," she announced dramatically, her voice carrying across the clearing, "we are here today not just to clean up this beautiful lake, but to stand up for our rights. This is our lake, and we won't let anyone take it away from us." John shook his head, trying to suppress a laugh. He walked closer to the gate, making sure to stay on his side of the property line. "Karen," he said calmly, "this isn't your lake. It's private property, and I've already explained this multiple times. You can't come in without permission." Karen ignored him, turning her attention back to the crowd. "See how unreasonable he's being. We're only here to help, and he's refusing to let us do the right thing." Her words stirred murmurs of agreement among the residents, many of whom looked torn between supporting Karen and feeling uneasy about breaking the law. Determined to make her point, Karen took things a step further. She grabbed a ladder from one of the volunteers and positioned it near the gate, clearly intending to climb over. "If he won't open the gate, we'll go around it," she declared, her voice rising with excitement. That's when John decided enough was enough. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "I'm calling the police," he announced loudly, ensuring everyone heard him. "You're trespassing, and I have every right to press charges." The crowd froze, unsure what to do next. Some people shuffled uncomfortably, while others whispered nervously among themselves. Even Karen hesitated for a moment, though her pride quickly kicked in. "Fine," she snapped, lowering the ladder with a huff. "Call them. Let's see what they say this time." When the officers arrived, they listened patiently to both sides. Karen launched into another dramatic speech, accusing John of denying the community access to their lake. But once again, John presented his deed and legal documents, leaving no room for doubt about his ownership. The officers reiterated that private property laws were clear. John had the right to restrict access, and anyone attempting to enter without permission would be considered trespassing. Humiliated and furious, Karen stormed off, muttering under her breath. The rest of the group dispersed awkwardly, some offering apologetic glances toward John before heading home. As the officers left, they reminded Karen to respect John's boundaries moving forward. For John, the incident felt like a turning point. While Karen's antics continued to frustrate him, he couldn't deny that standing his ground and having the law on his side had given him a renewed sense of confidence. The showdown may have been chaotic, but it also reinforced his belief that protecting his property was worth the fight, no matter how far Karen tried to push things. Karen's relentless campaign against John eventually reached a tipping point, but not in the way she had hoped. Her constant complaints and dramatic outbursts began to wear thin on the very people she relied on for support. The HOA board, once tolerant of her enthusiasm, grew increasingly frustrated with her inability to let go of the issue. At one particularly heated meeting, Karen proposed using association funds to hire a lawyer and sue John, a suggestion that sparked outrage among several members. "This is ridiculous," snapped Linda, a longtime resident who usually stayed out of conflicts. "We're talking about wasting thousands of dollars on something we don't even have a legal leg to stand on. It's his lake, Karen. You need to accept that." Others chimed in, voicing their concerns. Some pointed out that Karen's vendetta was dividing the community, creating tension where there had been none before. Others admitted they were tired of hearing her rant about John at every turn. Even those who initially sympathized with her cause started to distance themselves, realizing how unreasonable she was becoming. For Karen, this public rejection was a blow she hadn't anticipated. She stormed out of the meeting, slamming the door behind her, but the damage was done. Her influence over the HOA and the neighborhood was fading fast. Without the backing of the board or her neighbors, Karen's crusade lost its momentum. Embarrassed and isolated, she retreated from the spotlight, though everyone knew better than to think she'd truly given up. In the meantime, John saw an opportunity to mend fences, or at least prevent further hostility. He approached the HOA board with a compromise, hoping to find a middle ground that would satisfy both sides. At the next meeting, he presented his idea. Limited, supervised access to the lake for special events like community cleanups or family picnics. In exchange, residents would need to follow strict guidelines to ensure the environment remained protected and the property undamaged. The proposal took many by surprise. Some board members were skeptical, wondering if John was being sincere or simply trying to appease them. But as he explained his reasoning, it became clear that his offer came from a genuine desire to ease tensions. "I understand why people love the lake," he said. "It's a beautiful place, and I get that some of you have fond memories of spending time here. I'm not asking anyone to forget that. But my home is also my sanctuary, and I need to protect it. This compromise allows us to share the space responsibly without compromising either side." After some discussion, the board agreed to present John's proposal to the wider community. To everyone's relief, it was met with cautious optimism. Many residents appreciated the gesture, seeing it as a fair solution to an otherwise impossible situation. While not everyone was thrilled about the restrictions, most acknowledged that it was better than outright exclusion. As word spread, attitudes toward John began to shift. Neighbors who had once viewed him as stubborn or selfish now saw him as reasonable and willing to listen. Several even approached him privately to apologize for their earlier behavior, admitting they had misunderstood the situation. One man confessed, "I thought you were just being difficult, but after hearing your side, I realize how unfair we were. Thanks for giving us another chance." For John, these small moments of reconciliation meant more than he expected. Though he still valued his privacy above all else, knowing that some of his neighbors respected his boundaries brought a sense of peace. And while Karen remained a lingering presence in the background, occasionally muttering under her breath during chance encounters, he no longer felt threatened by her antics. The compromise didn't magically erase all traces of tension, but it marked the beginning of a new chapter. For the first time since installing the gate, John felt hopeful that harmony could be restored, not through conflict, but through understanding and mutual respect. As the weeks turned into months, life around the lake began to settle into a new rhythm. The compromise John had proposed proved to be more successful than anyone had anticipated. Under strict supervision and with clear rules in place, the occasional community events at the lake became something of a tradition. Families gathered for picnics, kids played by the water's edge, and volunteers joined cleanup efforts to ensure the area stayed pristine. While it wasn't the unrestricted access some residents had hoped for, most found joy in these shared moments, and they couldn't deny that John's guidelines helped preserve the beauty of the lake. For Karen, however, things took a different turn. Her relentless crusade against John had left her increasingly isolated within the neighborhood. Once seen as a passionate advocate for the community, she now came across as unreasonable and self-centered. People grew tired of her constant complaints and thinly veiled attempts to stir up trouble. Even her closest allies distanced themselves, unwilling to be drawn into her drama any longer. Eventually, Karen stepped down from her position on the HOA board, citing personal reasons. No one was surprised. Her credibility had been all but destroyed. She still attended meetings occasionally, sitting quietly in the back, but her fiery speeches and accusations were a thing of the past. To everyone's relief, the neighborhood felt calmer without her constant agitation. Though she continued to live in the development, Karen faded into the background, a shadow of her former self. John, on the other hand, emerged from the ordeal stronger and wiser. He learned valuable lessons about standing firm in the face of adversity, while also recognizing the importance of finding common ground. His decision to offer limited access to the lake not only diffused tensions, but also earned him a level of respect he hadn't expected. Neighbors who once viewed him as an outsider now greeted him warmly when they crossed paths. Some even invited him to barbecues or holiday parties, gestures that showed how far relationships had come since the height of the conflict. The experience taught the entire community important lessons too. Many residents reflected on their behavior during the feud, admitting they had jumped to conclusions or allowed peer pressure to cloud their judgment. They realized that respecting boundaries, whether physical or personal, was essential for maintaining harmony. Conversations around dinner tables often included discussions about civility, empathy, and the dangers of entitlement. Slowly but surely, the neighborhood transformed into a more united and considerate place. As for John, he returned to enjoying his peaceful retreat with renewed gratitude. The sound of birds chirping replaced the echoes of arguments, and the gentle lapping of water against the shore reminded him why he'd fallen in love with the property in the first place. He still kept an eye on his security cameras and maintained the gate, just in case old habits resurfaced. But the hostility that once loomed over his sanctuary had vanished. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves floated lazily onto the surface of the lake, John sat on his porch sipping coffee. He watched as a group of children laughed and skipped stones near the shoreline during one of the scheduled visits. For a moment, he felt a pang of nostalgia, not for the chaos of the past, but for the realization that peace sometimes required patience and persistence. In the end, the story of John and the lake became a testament to the power of resilience, compromise, and understanding. It served as a reminder that conflicts, no matter how heated, can often lead to growth, if people are willing to listen, adapt, and meet each other halfway. And so, life at the lake carried on, calm and serene, a reflection of the balance John had fought so hard to achieve.